Before we get into this, we should talk about why I'm reviewing this game before Battle for Bikini Bottom, or even Revenge of the Flying Dutchman. Well, you see, we're nearing the end of this marathon, and I want to save my favorites for last, so there's a hint of what I think of Triple B. As for the Flying Dutchman, it isn't very good. It's a collect-a-thon where you have to collect everything to end the basic story, levels are just okay, the visuals and controls aren't that well done, and the game at least had an interesting costume idea that it really didn't take a good advantage of. Don't get me wrong, Revenge of the Flying Dutchman isn't one of the worst games I've ever played, let alone for the PlayStation 2. It's just not all that great of a game, and not one I want to spend any more time than I already have on. So the SpongeBob movie. It was a pretty big deal for Nickelodeon, and me being in 5th grade at the time of its release, I certainly was excited. The game came out at about the same time as the film, and I remember getting it as a gift and playing through like the first 5 or 4 levels. After that, we had to sell the PlayStation 2. Again. And so that was the last I had played the game, or at least until I had picked it up a few years back for this video. So, on the topic of the game's plot, let me just say this, okay? Just watch the movie, trust me. It's a licensed game, it doesn't do the plot justice in comparison to the movie. And for me, that's fine. It sticks to the basic setup, SpongeBob doesn't get the position of manager at the Krusty Krab 2, Plankton steals Neptune's crown and blames it on Mr. Krabs, and SpongeBob decides to go on an adventure with Patrick to retrieve the crown and save Bikini Bottom. Yeah, not too different from the movie. It's the crappy, cheap cutscenes that make this so hard to sit through. Now I don't want to hate on Heavy Iron Studios, as it really seems like they were given a tight schedule and a smaller budget to work on this game, which couldn't have been easy. But these crappy still images for cutscenes are just so cheap looking. Again, watch the movie instead. It's not an amazing animated film, but the characters are still charming, it's got some funny moments, and it's a fine, entertaining ride throughout. I find enjoyment in the movie anyway. Now, based off the first level of the game, you might get the impression that the SpongeBob the movie, the game, does not belong in a marathon of collect-a-thon games. After all, the first level is very linear, and has no hub world. But you see, the level select screen is basically the hub world in this game, and trust me, you're going to have to be collecting things called tokens. Before we get into that, let me just say that this game is broken up into levels, and there are 4 different kinds of levels. Platforming levels, driving, sliding, and bosses. Boss levels are, of course, where you take on a boss. And for the most part, they're pretty decent fights. Not too hard, and actually kind of fun. With the exception of the final boss, who is considered to be ridiculously hard. Driving levels have you, well, driving around on a course to reach the end. They don't tend to last too long, and there are some fun obstacles to dodge when driving along. Though it is annoying you have to complete some of them in one setting. Sliding levels, on the other hand, are a lot of fun and control super well. You're constantly going downhill, jumping over gaps, finding shortcuts, and running into enemies. These huge sliding levels have very complex layouts that keep things more interesting, and finding these different routes makes them more replayable. These are, by far, one of the best parts of the game, and I found them to be genuinely fun, with the only exception being Shell City, due to a bit of an annoyingly complex way of navigating through that level on your first run. That one sucks. Lastly, we have the platforming levels, which are mostly linear with only a few small detours that often lead to a challenge area, before you have to go back to the main route. The platforming isn't too bad, with some nice layouts that put SpongeBob and Patrick's skills to good use. Yep, you play as both SpongeBob and Patrick in this game, and in some of the levels you can switch between the two. Both of them will learn new skills throughout the game, like SpongeBob can roll bubble, do an uppercut, and rock out on a guitar. Patrick, on the other hand, can throw objects, belly slam, and do this cartwheel move that's good for taking out enemies, as well as moving around a lot faster. It's a move I really enjoy using. A small feature I really like about this game is that these skills can be upgraded. You see, there are these collectible weights that when you collect enough of them, you get a point that can be used to improve one of your character's moves or even their health. like Patrick's belly slam gets a better shockwave and SpongeBob's uppercut becomes explosive. So yeah, the levels are entertaining to play, however I find the last few platforming levels to be a bit too long, and feel more tiring than they are fun. I also am not a huge fan of the game's visual style. It's a very dark and muddy looking game in many of the levels, though that's not to say that there aren't any locations that are still neat, cause there are, my favorites being the Goofy Goober and its colorful sweet food shop, the dark trench, or at least the monsters there, and the bubble blowing bar. The music is decent. I mean, it mostly has these rock-like themes that might seem a bit out of place for a SpongeBob game, but it's not a bad soundtrack. Now, the biggest issue I have with this game is how you progress. In order to get to the next level, or hell, even to earn a new ability in the level to continue, you need to collect tokens. These tokens are often found at the end of a level, which is fine, but in the platforming levels they can also be found in those detour sections. I don't mind the within level platforming detours to get an extra token. They're usually small little challenges that are some basic platforming obstacles you have to get past to get the token, and sometimes it's even just a little secret wall you have to break through that leads you to a small section to complete to get the token. Again, these aren't too bad and they work pretty well for me. It's the challenge zone tokens that I found often sucked, such as going through all these rings for an obnoxiously long time with at times some sharp turns as well as not the best controls for making them. Or battle zones where they send huge waves of enemies at you that really get annoying mostly due to how the camera works and some of the enemies' moves. Rolling around in a ball over a very long obstacle course which just becomes tedious if you fail too many times. Or platforming challenges that are timed and have these awful ice cubes that piss me off so much when I land on them wrong, and it wastes your time. It sucks so much. These aren't fun, nor are the driving and sliding tokens. To get the extra tokens from these levels, you have to go through these challenges, like driving around through rings or time trials and so forth. Basically, these are just tasks that I personally don't tend to enjoy in video games. This would all be fine if it was bonus or optional content that doesn't get in the way of the main game. But you need so many of these tokens to get to the end of the game, and I just stopped. Yeah, the token cap was so high, I didn't play the last two levels because at that point, just wasn't having fun. And when I'm just not having that much fun at such a late point in the game, I tend to just not play any further. At the very least, if you are trying to get all the tokens to reach the end, and you've come across areas where tokens can appear but haven't yet actually collected them, the level select screen allows you to warp to those spots, which is very convenient, and I do have to give them credit for that. So, would I recommend SpongeBob SquarePants, the movie, the game? No, I would not. Alright, I kinda would if the game didn't require you to collect tokens. If it was just a more linear platformer, I would enjoy this game so much more, even if I don't like the later levels all that much. The tokens for me feel like needless padding, and even if they weren't there, I wouldn't go back to this game too often. For a licensed game, it's alright. There's some good platforming, I like the point system, but I hate those tokens. A lot of the challenges suck, and I can't get past those cheap looking cutscenes. No, when it comes to a SpongeBob game that's worthwhile, well, I'll see you guys next time.